Yeah, so that's MASH. That is a fucking fever dream. That is not anyone's. That is not anyone's imagination. That is what this movie feels like, and it is. And the reason why I kind of wanted to restart sort of the creative writing circle is because, like, cycle through with this movie, is because I talked a little bit about this before about how a lot of I've been dealing with a lot of newer writers lately, and they really want to do like world building and setting and a lot of this other work, but they don't really want but they want to kind of they don't want to learn structure even. Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot about the air conditioner. So even older, more established writers, like I'm looking at their book and they're giving me a book that's like 800 fucking pages. And I'm like, there's no reason. Oh shit, did you spill water on all our power cables?
Nope, I spilled water on one postcard, which is fine.
Okay, that's fine. Um,
Hold on one moment.
okay.
Oh, it's not a postcard, it's a book.
It's
Oh,
the
it's,
instructions to
yeah,
the
it's
thing. Yeah.
instructions.
Um, oh, it's just like a nice little like bead of water.
Yeah, it's just a
Yeah.
nice little bit of water.
Here, just like wipe it on something.
Oh, you want me to wipe it on you?
Yeah, yeah, just wipe it on me. Here.
Whoa.
Like, there we go. There. Resolved.
Resolved!
Okay. The lore is a hard drug, and I talked about it before that lore is a procrastination drug. It's like it is a safe thing. You can see how it can be valuable, but ultimately, in terms of narrative, it should be going the other way around. Your narrative should be informing the like you should be creating the lore based upon what you need from your narrative, not creating all the lore every like there's so much that you could like there's an amount of lore, there's diminishing returns with lore. Like some lore is really good, and then if you start going into the history of all the other things, if you look at Star Wars and you look at like behind the scenes or interviews or weird things like George Lucas said, like bras don't work in space, like that, like George Lucas created way too much fucking lore, and for in his mind all these things kind of made sense and whatever, and George Lucas had to be kind of saved from himself, like by people who were better at telling stories. Like he basically came in with this like crazy story, bad editing, a lot of like a fever dream of a thing. But then Mara Lucas in the editing bay saved the movie by cutting out a lot of shit. He had a consultant who was like a college professor who was like, you got to use like Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey, to create a structure for this fucking thing so that way it works well. And that's why Star Wars is one of the best films ever, because it's like you get this structure from people who knew what they were talking about, who saved the movie and are undercredited for that contribution. And then as George Lucas starts to believe that he himself created all this greatness of Star Wars, you start to see it unravel. And there's kind of one of those things where it's like with plagiarism, eventually as time goes on, the plagiarist will always be revealed. And so yeah, so it's like in spite of George Lucas, not exclusively because of George Lucas, as Chris is saying. Um, yeah, and so like with a lot of new writers, they tend to lore is safe, lore and setting and everything it's safe, and you see how important it is to background and setting and context, but the story is danger, plot is danger. That's where you can make things go bad, and that's where it's all important. That's where the stakes are really on the writer, and so
That's why it's dangerous.
that's why it's dangerous, and that's why they don't want to do that work. And that's kind of what defines like a writer from a non-writer, and it's why like so many people are like, I got the story in me and I'm going to write it, I'm going to get it out, I'm going to get it done, and they never do, because you can stay in lore and you can stay in this like wonderland forever of like the context of the story without ever actually making it. But the other problem too is as you start writing, especially your first thing, this is why it's so important to have finished a work from beginning to end, is that your ideas don't see how the pieces don't match. So in your mind, it seems like you have beginning, middle, end. You have the whole thing, it's going to flow, it's going to go. And this is the beauty of the snowflake method. I hate story plus shape. It pisses me off all the time. But this one actually does have value. Also, this lecture was really about knowing things you don't really like is very beneficial to being a writer, even if you don't like the idea. But the story snowflake is basically that you build from the more abstracted idea of just like, say, your log line that just is a one sentence summary of your story, and then you keep building it into like a paragraph summary, into a page summary, into a several pages, until eventually you fill out your whole story, because then that allows you to see where things are not connecting. But also what does that is writing the fucking story. Sorry. Like, eventually you're going to run into it, and the more experience you have, the easier it is for you to join these things. That a lot of them end up being like barely an inconvenience. It's just like you're just like, oh, that's something that's going on. You know, you spend 1 minute and you correct it, or even looking into it, you can see how your things are not working and really build on it to add more, because sometimes they're not working because you didn't do enough work, you didn't do enough character work, you didn't build. A lot of times it's you didn't build at the beginning of the story, and then as you start to build at the beginning of the story, you usually build your themes, build your everything, and then you kind of go forward. MASH is a fucking fever dream, because you are like, it was one of those things where watching it with you guys was interesting, because people were enjoying it so much more at the beginning half, and I was like, maybe I was just too rough on it. I have not been in a good spot mentally, like, so when I watched it, maybe I was in a bad mood and I was just like, oh, this shit, right? But then, like, right after the midpoint, like right after the suicide scene, it just sort of loses all its focus. Because at the beginning, the focus is we're going to introduce the characters. We're going to create all these episodic scenes that create the characters, and then we're going to play a little bit in this world, and then you get to that midpoint, and then they just run out of fucking steam. And so now they're clearly reaching for filler to make this thing go. And that's the problem, is that when you don't have structure, and you don't have a dramatic want and need, which is like basically what is your, so like we see at the end of the film that going home was the ending, it was the objective. So it would have been nice if we saw that. Yeah, like we saw that from the beginning, that the scope of this film is going to be Hawkeye like the narrative is man comes to town, man leaves town, which is an archetypical story type. And so if we knew that was the thing, and it was like Hawkeye is like, I want to leave, right? And that was one of the, like, if they did some character work to do that his objective is to survive. His dramatic want is survive until the end of his draft period. But then again, none of his actions can actually go towards that want, right?
Yeah.
Now in the show, they might have some shenanigans that are like, let me get tickets to Tokyo, like R&R, or something that can help with their draft status or something, right? And that's why in the show, Hawkeye is just kind of a social worker, right? Like, he kind of, like, someone else comes in, they have a problem, he ends up trying to shenanigan, gaslight, and manipulate people into helping other people out, so that way there's a little more humanity in this. And even though he's still just trapped in this place, like, you know, he's trying to control these things, right? but that's because the show is structured. The show, because television cannot not be structured. Yeah, aren't we all? Um, the um, but the but see, the thing is because there's no structure to this, it just keeps going on and on and on, and so there's not really much of a forward momentum. And when you get forward momentum in a sequence, then when the sequence resolves and comes to an end, it just all your momentum comes to a halt, and then it feels like you're getting a lot of story, like a lot of energy from the audience to restart that inertia, and it just makes the film seem so long and going on forever. So there was sort of this inverse where I was like worried everyone was enjoying it too much and I was shitting on this film, and I was like, uh-oh, like maybe I fucked up. And then as everybody started hating it, seeming to hate it, quiet down, not really, then I was like, oh good, I was correct, but also now all my friends are not having fun anymore. But but the thing is this is sort of a negative example as to why structure is so important. Knowing where you're going, how you're doing it, and we'll go into structure in a couple of months. On I'm not sure. I think I'm using Chevalier, fucking French. Using a Hulu movie to teach some structure. Again, because it's not great at structure, I can also go back to Mirai, which is also bad at structure, but great at showing structure. Because the interesting thing about structure is it's like editing. If you're too good at it, it's subtle. You need to be an advanced and an experienced writer to recognize the structure through how silky smooth it is, right? But if you're not, like, if you're learning it for the first time, you really need stories that are kind of juddery and kind of shitty. Like they're a little heavy-handed with the structure, and so I like these two films because they are heavy-handed with the structure, which will help us see why it's important and stuff like that. But because people really want to go with instinctive storytelling, this is what instinctive storytelling does. This is where you land if you just write your story shooting from the hip. And so I kind of wanted to talk both in how legitimate instinctive storytelling is and how it can be successful and how it does work, but also like, oh my fucking god, right? Like, yeah. And so like with but yeah, like my friend who worked in TV for a while, and he's finished this magnum opus book, and it's 800 pages, and it's each and every one of the characters in the book has their own novel, right, within this book. And I'm like, I don't want to fucking proofread this. And he was like, I'll give you like a truncated version of it to say if the main structure is working, and or if you can edit it by piece. And I was like, I'll look at it piece by piece, but if it's not going from beginning to end, I don't know. But one thing that why writing programs work a certain way is because, like, having taken a piece from beginning to end is very useful skill to develop and to get experience for. And so short fiction and short form is like, get your failures out when it's only like 20 pages that you're throwing away, and then do it 10 more times, right? So you're throwing away 200 pages. But what's hard is if you write a 200 page novel, that's only your first go around from beginning to end of a thing you may need to just throw away, right? Or you're going to constantly be repairing it and tweaking it and repairing it and tweaking it. And so not always, sometimes people's first book does make it. Sometimes it even makes it to the shelves quite unedited, like Twilight, because industries are corrupt and weird. But anyway, so yeah, so that was kind of my hope with MASH, because it's like, it is a high and low film. We should cover it. It's really good to cover it at kind of the beginning of a cycle. Um, there was something else I was gonna say. Um, there was the inevitable. Oh, the guy who on the other team who kept thinking he was a track star, right? Like after they drugged him. Like that was a really good game to play because it's like it creates this what's called the inevitable surprise. Inevitable surprises are wonderful. It really means that like you set up something so perfectly well that when the payoff happens, it seems like of course this was going to happen, but you never would have seen it coming. And so that whole idea of coach, I'm ready to run. I'm ready to run. He's like, what? This is a track. This is football. Get the hell out of here. And then he comes in again. Also, rule of threes. You come in. You set it up, or you establish it. You set up a pattern, and then you pay off the pattern. And so, or they call it the setup, delivery, and punch. I don't understand how setup and delivery are necessarily different because they're kind of the same, but more the way I would say it is thing, different thing, punch. Like thing, but with a little bit of spicy on it. A little bit of spicy, or a little twist to it, and then something slightly different if you're doing it well. But sometimes people just do it again, right? They're just, and that basically says I'm establishing a thing. Pay attention to this thing. You need it in your like memory, and then now it's paying off, and yeah. Wind up, telegraph, impact. That's a good one. Yeah, it made you laugh, even though it was quite like I was quite dissociated. Yeah, this.
Which is saying something because there is that setup for the joke.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you can't just like walk into the movie theater, see the gun, and see the gunshot and the guy running, and get it. Like there was that setup.
Yeah,
and it was strong.
Yeah, the person who is doing this, like the person who's going to just cut it and put it on TikTok, he can't just cut it and put him running into the cheerleaders. It wouldn't work.
Mm-mm.
And if you just sort of put me in coach, and then run it. It still wouldn't work. He'd basically need to drop the whole football scene because it also needs time to cook, right? It needs time to bake sometimes, like time away from the joke. But sometimes jokes are immediate and need to be delivered right away. And it's really a matter of judgment and timing, right? It was funny for the injection. They took the time to sanitize the area. Yeah.
They're not heathens.
Yeah, that's a good point. They did. Maya's comment with that they sanitized the injection. I didn't even notice that. Oh, that's so good.
Like a little cotton ball and just like
just like. Well, also they like stashed it under someone's like belly fold too, so it's like you'd want that to be sanitized, yeah. But anyway, like so like the individual jokes are great, scene structure and the improv is really good. But what it needs is overall structure, and there is some sense of overall structure because they didn't just completely throw away the original screenplay, but they basically threw away, like they basically used it as a like locations chart, right? Like they were like where locations and who,
cast.
yeah, locations and cast, yeah, basically. And so we got to see beating the hell out of the game. We got to see conflict, yes, and there's a lot good to learn from this fever dream of psychosis. I think that's it. There was maybe something I forgot. I don't know, but I'll let you guys go. It's been but also that's the thing with when you're unstructured. I'm saying this over and over again, but it's very important for like kind of shooting from the hip writing is that once you like the movie introduces a whole new character who then takes over as the protagonist, basically. So I'm gonna call him Dr. Jones. Dr. Jones comes in, and he's now the main character, right? Trapper comes in, he's now the main character, and Trapper comes in early in the game. And so it's like, but we're established that Hawkeye is the main character. But he kind of falls off as he's outperformed by the other characters. Which is fine. There's narrative structures called the involved witness, which basically is like the Great Gatsby, where Gatsby is not the narrator of the Great Gatsby, but it is a first-person narrated book. It's through the perspective of Nick Carraway. I love that perspective. It's really fun to play with, because then you have like questions and things, and it's all about like assumptions, and it's a really interesting narrative to play with. But it's not really useful for every medium. Would be interesting to see a video game that's played like that. Like,
oh yeah.
Yeah. That. I'm not gonna waste 10 years of development figuring it out, but it would be interesting.
Always 20 minutes of thinking about it.
Always 20 minutes of thinking about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, structure, kids. Structure is everything.
Structure's a hell of a drug.
Structure is a hell of a drug.
That nobody on this film took.
Yeah. Only like methamphetamine.
Yeah.
Or amphetamine sulfate. I don't know if that's the same. What else? I don't know if I said the thing I meant to say. Oh no.
What thing did you want to say?
I don't know. How did I start talking just now? I'm awful. How do you guys fucking deal? What? Structure good for movie and lectures. Yes. That is correct. I don't know how to
Savage.
I don't know how to be better, because I'll have these notes that I prepare, and then it's like, and they're notes. Yeah, they're good. They flow. They have structure. But then someone in the chat says something, or I get distracted, or I get what was it? I don't have ADHD, but I do have ADOS, and it's attention deficit. Ooh, shiny. Anyway, there was something about how, that's what it is. It's fuel to the fire. Every time you bring in a new character or bring in something, because you're trying to create more forward story momentum, because what you thought would carry you through is not enough to carry you through. So then you end up having your weird fucking football quarter of a movie. Like, it's like, and that goes on for way too fucking long. And now that's the setting of the movie. The new setting is a football game in Korea between, like it's no longer like a medical hospital, though it still has some medical elements of it, but it's basically like, that's the whole new setting. That's the whole thing. And Dr. Jones now takes over, because he's the one with the most status and the most agency in that scene. And like, Hawkeye is pushed out of his own movie quite early on in the game, because there's no structure. There's nothing to really push Hawkeye through. He's actually a supporting character. He's not even the dentist, the well-equipped dentist, has more of a protagonist arc than Hawkeye does. And yeah, Hawkeye is completely dethroned. And so that's the thing when you're having structure, is like, it's very common, especially for new writers and for instinctive writers, to have what I call the protagonist problem, which is the least developed character in your story is your protagonist, and that is death. That is death. However, what's interesting too is, in the realm of games, straight white men were like, you know what's perfect? And anything you do to this will fuck it up? Have a non-talking straight white man as the protagonist. As long as they just shut the fuck up and roll through, like, that is perfection. Everyone can relate with a straight white man. You change their skin color, you change their anything, you make them say a word, fucked. Your game is fucked, right? And it's like, that is death in every other medium. So how is games the exception? And it's like, there's logic where you can be like, okay, I understand why this could be the exception for games. However, people still want to relate with a charismatic and wonderful character, right? But oftentimes what games will do is they'll put it off to a side character. So it's like, was it like Jak and Daxter, right? Like, it's like the quiet main character, and then you have like the shit talking like Mushu character who, right? Banjo and Kazooie, yeah. And so it's like, but like, because they're like, you'll lose interest in the main character if they change, which also comes from a bad interpretation of the idea that the more abstracted something is, the more you can project onto it, which I was talking about earlier with books being the ideal medium because it is the most abstracted, because you make the most details. But when it comes to our main characters, actually people want to see endearing traits. They want to see, oh, that's also Save the Cat. Because you might think Hawkeye is a total asshole, and this is kind of the era of the Save the Cat trope. So that's why there was Pup Pup, the random dog that he's just like, oh, it's Pup Pup. I play with dogs, so now I'm a good person and not. Yeah, that's the whole reason for the dog, is because they were like, maybe Hawkeye is a bit of a dick. So, but if you can't be a dick and play with dogs.
True.
So. Yeah, more games with silent protagonists. Yeah, Portal, Half-Life, others. Yeah, but also like and so like Portal, it's like now we're having like a silent, like ethnically ambiguous woman. So now what, right? And then you have Gladys now having to converse with herself and be charming as fuck. And in Portal 2, you have Wheatley, who also has a different character, and so you're relying on this like external stimuli to do this stuff. Whereas, like, I don't know, like say Mass Effect, you then create the narrative as part of the character's choice, or the false choice, which as a narrative designer, I'm kind of a little annoyed that people really falsify their choices. Like, you can still make game in the game. That's the difference between a character and the avatar. Yes. Otherwise, silent is entirely. Oh, this. But then there's so this is like a whole discussion where it's like, then you get into like Grand Theft Auto 4, where the more characterization you give to the character, the more you run into the likelihood of narrative dissonance. Once the controls are pulled off, then you have is Niko Bellic? Yeah, Niko Bellic. I don't know why I needed to say it with the accent to get it, to remember it. But Niko Bellic, he's in the cutscenes. He's like, I am so sick of the killing all the time back in Mother Russia, and then it's like after the cinematic ends, and then you can just rocket launcher a bus, right? For no reason, not even a mission. It's just rocket launcher a bus. Yeah, grenade into a hospital. And it's like,
that's my idea of a fun time.
Yeah. And then afterwards, he's just like, I'm so sick of the key. After he just went on like a 5-star rampage against the cops. Yeah. Destroying the city, and yeah. Anyway, but yeah, that's a whole thing. But we're now starting to get into the area of like, actually people like characters, then the more you develop them. But in a book, in a film, if your main character starts losing agency, like, basically a protagonist by definition is somebody who affects the plot, someone who pushes the plot forward. This is why I also focus on definitions, because if you use a bad definition, you can get into some problems. Like, so people will say the protagonist is your main character, And so that doesn't actually help you or push you to do anything. There's no call to action in main character, because then you're just like, okay, main character exists, good. Uh, but if you're like protagonist is somebody who drives the action forward, then um, then the character who then basically what you're saying is that major decisions and major plot points have to be done by the dramatic action of the main character. So if there are, especially the major decision points, like, do you leave home? Do you the things that take you from Act 1 into Act 2? The things that take you into the climax. The climax should be resolved by the main character taking an action. In the climax area of this film, we don't even see Hawkeye, right? We don't even see Trapper. And also, all your main characters should be introduced in the beginning of, at least in some capacity, in Act 1, or in a structured narrative. Unstructured narrative, I guess you can do whatever the fuck you want. Like I said, I am allergic to unstructured narratives. And so I'm going to be at allergy risk to myself. I will be teaching.
Don't worry, he just picked up his inhalers.
Yes.
All of the above, and
I will just
start huffing puffing now. Good job.
Yeah, I feel like that's another thing. So like games for the most part largely had this like growing stage of the technology doesn't really support it, right? And then eventually they go to a point where it's like, oh, actually, we can do it, but now everybody's afraid to. Kind of like in Jesse Schell's book, the problem is that a lot of games is developed off of the idea that games is a new form and that it is independent from every other form that has ever existed. Instead of looking at other art forms and going, oh yeah, these people had smart ideas and I could probably use, Aristotle. And so I get so frustrated because like a good way of telling a narrative designer to shut the fuck up is to just throw a GDC talk at them and say, here's a link, spend an hour on this. I think you need to spend an hour on this. And it's like, I don't need white boys from Silicon Valley telling me how to write a story because I have a fucking master's degree. But let's see what these computer scientists say about story. And then they go, we, with our data, found out through playtesting after years of struggling with the narrative that Aristotle was correct. Except they didn't read Aristotle, so they're like, players like a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. If you set up, yeah, I'm Jerry Seinfeld. If you start off your story with a beginning where you establish who the character is and why you're there, then players in our data suggest that they like that more instead of just doing a bunch of random tasks for no reason. What's the deal with that? Right.
Jerry Seinfeld is really my favorite GDC talk.
And I'm so pissed off about it because I'm like, stop sending me 1 hour talks.
By Jerry Seinfeld?
By Jerry Seinfeld. By these computer scientists telling me what writing 101, what I'm like, and UC, every kid who graduated UC Irvine and then like, They heard this talk. Every kid who fell asleep in Dr. Worminski's Writing 100 class, or English 100 class, they know this, and they fell asleep in that. Yeah. What's the deal with unstructured narratives? Yeah. Anyway, so it's like, it's so remarkable how much GDC talks are like white men spending hours saying, we had a completely unstructured narrative that just, that they just had a completely unstructured narrative, and then they were like, structure helped our story, and it's like, but they don't know that. They don't even know what structure is. So they're like, here's a helpful tip trick from the creator of Indie Game that this is how things go. And it's like, hire a fucking writer. And they're like, oh, we hired a writer, but they had a bachelor's degree and we paid them $20,000 a year, right? And it's like, yeah, maybe hire a writer who won't work for the same wages as the cashier at Target. Maybe an MFA is important. Maybe have somebody, like, I don't know, like, I'm just so frustrated with this shit because it's like, anyway, the stuff that I am planning to teach in the following film series and that I have taught beforehand are things that people who are quite rich will then go to a rich person convention for rich people, or in Kat's experience, people who are going to spend way too much money to attend. Like, they're to then say, like, by the way, I figured out a thing that wouldn't been a non-issue if I just hired core staff that my industry does not feel is core staff or worth a living wage. Because they'll say, like, you know what, an engineer must make 6 figures, but they're not going to say, but do we need a writer? At all, even. Yeah, because they're like, because that's the thing, because every person is like, I have a story inside of me, and it has all this world I've been building. And it's like, as not to say, like, don't go into writing, don't trust yourself to write a story, but it's just, like, learning these things that we will be learning are, like, these things are available. People like me are desperate to talk about these things. Hire us, or even just attend our Discord. Anyway. Yeah. The end. I think that's it. I think I'm out. I think I'm out of bullshit to say. Do you have things to add? I feel like if this movie wasn't such a fever dream, it would be easier to.
Do you think that they could have cut out everything past the suicide part and, like, it would be a better movie?
Let's see, what's after the suicide part? There's this football.
There's going to golf in Japan.
I think they could have done one or the other, because the problem is if they cut out everything and he just went home afterwards, structurally it would be lopsided, right?
Yeah.
It would basically be like, here's all the characters, here's some conflict, and here's some story with all those characters, right? The end, right? So it would be malformed. Now there are structures for stories that do this, but you wouldn't make a feature film that does it, right? So it's like, so I see why they were like, we need to pad it with more shit, right? But so basically with a feature film, with a short story, you would do that. You would go like, who is the characters? What is the conflict? And then something poignant, and you kind of resolve it very quickly. That's kind of a good short story structure. I would add a little more to that, like more complexity there. But people do write like that with the short story structure. You can't cut the tits, how dare you?
The shower scene.
The shower scene, yeah.
I'm sorry, everyone.
What?
I attempted to cut the tits.
Yeah, you did.
I'm sorry.
But you do have the tit mags, yeah. So anyway, but then you have, I do think yeah, I think the tits is actually an important part of the film, even if it doesn't age very well. But especially because it's like, if you're looking at it as a, also, Kat, I think you missed this part. The memoir I was reading regarding a MASH doctor said that the tone of the shenanigans was actually accurate to being there, even if the specific shenanigans of the film and the show were not what they did in Korea. And the tits shenanigan, the shower scene was a helicopter pilot, while a girl he liked, or woman he liked, was in the shower, came really close with the helicopter to blow the curtain away, or to blow the tent away. And so everybody got to see her naked, basically. and he denies he did it on purpose. So basically, like that is kind of a like based on something that really happened. So I feel like if their goal was to try to capture what MASH life is in a documentary style, I feel like you need to have that scene. the Yeah, I feel like the reason they did the football scene is because in a film they want a climax or something that at least feels like a climax. And the football scene at least is a lot of visual action. And so that it's a bad choice in that there's no dramatic action. It's just a bunch of shenanigans, not even featuring the main character. And it's just a distraction. It is not relevant to the plot as established so far. It's very episodic in that it is. I mean, Robert Altman says it's episodic. I would say it's disjointed because nothing connects. Right? There is no through line, and so the other than a unity of characters rather than unity like Aristotle has the four unities. I can never remember all of them because most of them don't apply anymore. But it's like unity of place, unity of time, unity of action, and then there's another one I never
Unity
remember.
of characters?
I said that just now, but it's not really.
Oh.
I don't think it's an Aristotelian
right.
unity. But anyway, army men only work on tits. That's why they're all cucks. Yes. Thing you do. Let's see. Clearly, my mouse is dying. Okay, clearly from same educational background upbringing of Jesse, I took the air out of my coworker's tires so that she'd be forced to get a ride home with me from work. Jesse Waters. Who's that? I'm having trouble remembering Jesse Waters.
Oh, the guy who took the air out of a coworker's tire. Oh, Fox News.
Oh, Fox News. Oh, wow. But yeah, anyway, yeah, so the role of the football scene is to superficially fill in for the lack of a thing that it lacks generally, right?
Lack of a climax.
Like lack of a climax.
Blue balls this entire film.
Yeah, you could have also done it with the MP scene, like that is the climax, but there was no real danger. They always maintained the control of the scene, right? With the MPs in the Tokyo.
Oh.
Like that's the conclusion of that, right? That's the conclusion of that sequence. But that doesn't really come to a climax either. So I'm willing to say that probably the original, maybe an earlier draft, while they're looking at dailies, they're like, yeah, this works. This completes the film, right? That's the climax, is that finally it's going to catch up to them. But then it doesn't because they work their way out. But they work their way out so powerfully and so quickly without any peril that then they're like, well, we need a climax, and that climax then is fulfilled by the football scene.
You know why? You know the problem was?
What?
They pulled out a gun and the doctor didn't take it from them, throw it away.
Yeah.
Got out of that problem too fast.
Basically, yeah.
Should
just took the gun and threw it away. Yeah, basically there was no real peril, no real, which the show kind of puts Hawkeye and Trapper into the similar situations, and so now it's like their court-martial, and that's probably where it should have gone, is their court-martial, and then it's like, but they negotiate through. Instead of a football going to the sports genre, they should have gone to the legal show genre. That's how you make that climax. That's probably how I would have fixed it. And then and it would have, and I think maybe the Jerry Seinfeld ending, the Seinfeld for being Jerry Seinfeld, a little too relevant for this. Anyway, so Jerry Seinfeld is the ending of Seinfeld. You would basically look back at all the crimes.
Oh yeah.
And then have them have to defend and work their way through, ultimately saying like, you know what, I am, the good I do versus, and then justify and explain all the crimes that they had done and why the horrors of war and everything. But then, and that would have, and then sell all their themes together. Hey, Raja.
Hi.
sell all your themes together, and yeah, the dentist is a microcosm of the whole movie. Anyway, so anything else, Katie? That was a good discussion direction that we went through. For anything else?
No, I think Raja has appeared on stream,
Yes.
so that checks all the boxes.
That checks all the boxes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're starting to hear fireworks, so we'll let you, if your time zone permits. I know, or even nationality, nation.
If your amount of patriotism.
If your amount of patriotism to the NATO superpower. Anyway, to the one non-signatory of the International Child Rights. Oh, what about the drugs?
What about drugs? The thing about drugs is you have to clean the area first before you ingest.
Oh yeah, clean the area. How the characters in the base feel about American patriotism and their power structure. Your authority is not recognized. For Kick-Ass. Nice. Archer is too good of a show. Oh, but what was the question of drugs? Just do drugs. Be gay, do crimes.
No, don't do drugs. She thought that drugs...
You can take your time. I'll just put the cat on. Stream more. Hi, Russia. Nope. Okay, he's not happy. There we go.
There we go. There's the boy.
He's not happy with that. We allow him too much autonomy, so then when we try to take it away from him, he's like, "Excuse you. Why are you touching me this?" Oh. Here we announce that drugs are here with fireworks. Oh, nice.
We should do drugs.
We should do drugs.
We should do drugs.
We should do drugs. I should have refrigerated beer. I actually was thinking of doing this movie Sloppy Drunk because I've been very sad lately, and also this movie is bad. But I think the redeeming nature of this film required a lot of the minutia of writing, even though it's improvised and not really written. Oh, here we go.
Here's the cat.
Oh yeah, 4th of July is the reason for the season of this stream, because the stream kind of as a whole came about as a way to entertain people and give people something to do during the pandemic, the present and current and ongoing pandemic, but also 4th of July being like a holiday. It was like important to try to kind of give like an alternative thing to do on the 4th of July rather than go get COVID.
Yeah, so we watched Independence Day the first year.
Yeah, the first year we watched Independence Day, which was a giant lecture about how everything is phallic versus yonic, and Freudian readings about how the alien ships have circle shields, but the aircraft the humans used are very phallic and firing their missiles, and they can't get through the feminine walls until, and then it's the fear of getting fucked, basically. Yeah. It's like this hyper masculine fear of the dick, which then the dick arrives out of the ship, tries to fuck them. And so they're like, we have to be the fucker with our tiny little dicks.
You gotta be the fucker before they fuck you.
Before they fuck you, because the greatest fear is to be feminized by getting fucked in the butt. America, 4th of July.
And then we watched Full Metal Jacket.
Oh, then we watched Full Metal Jacket, which is a longer, more complex thing. But yeah, so that's why the stream today is on a Tuesday. Usually our streams are on Sunday. So, the end.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll let everybody go. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for staying with us. It's got to be like midnight for you, right, Kat? Okay. Uh, close to. All right, so we'll let everybody go. Thanks for coming. I hope this was helpful in some way. The movies will get, or what we're watching will get better, but we're also going to do more with structureless stuff because that's what everybody kind of wants to do by default. And I'm going to basically say, learn structure. It's good for you.